Ch.4. So let the reader who expects this book to be a political expose slam its covers shut right now. If only it were all so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? During the life of any heart, this line keeps changing place. Sometimes it is squeezed one way by exuberant evil, and sometimes it shifts to allow enough space for good to flourish. One and the same human being is, at various stages, under various circumstances, a totally different human being. At times he is close to being a devil, at times to sainthood, but his name doesn't change. And to that name we ascribe the whole lot, good and evil. Socrates taught us, know thyself. Confronted by the pit into which we are about to toss those who have done us harm, we halt, stricken dumb. It is, after all, only because of the way things worked out that they were the executioners, and we weren't. If Malyutas Guratov had summoned us, we too probably would have done our work well. From good to evil is one quaver, says the proverb, and correspondingly from evil to good. From the moment when our society was convulsed by the reminder of those illegalities and tortures, they began on all sides to explain, to write, to protest. Good people were there too, meaning in the NKVD, the MJB. We know which good people they're talking about. They were the ones who whispered to the old Bolsheviks, don't weaken, or even sneaked a sandwich into them, and who kicked all the rest around wherever they found them. But weren't there also some who rose above the party, who were good in a general human sense? Broadly speaking, they should not have been there. The organs avoided employing such people, eliminating them at the recruitment stage, and such people played their hand shrewdly so as to get out of it. Whoever got in by mistake either adjusted to the milieu or else was thrown out, or erased out, or even fell across the rails himself. Still, were there no good people left there? In Kishinev, a young lieutenant gapist, state security, went to Father Victor Shapovalnikov a full month before he was arrested. Get away from here, go away, they plan to arrest you. Did he do this on his own, or did his mother send him to warn the priest? After the arrest, this young man was assigned to Father Victor as an escort guard, and he grieved for him. Why didn't you go away? Or here's another. I had a platoon commander named Lieutenant O. At the front, no one was closer to me than he was. During half the war, we ate from the same pot. Even under enemy shell fire, we would gulp down our food between explosions so the stew wouldn't get cold. He was a peasant lad with a clean soul and a view of life so undistorted that neither officer candidate school nor being an officer had spoiled him in any degree. He even did what he could to soften my hard edges in many ways. Throughout his service as an officer, he concentrated on one thing only, preserving the lives and strength of his soldiers, many of whom were no longer young. He was the first to tell me what the Russian villages were like then, and what the collective farms were like. He talked about all of this without resentment, without protest, very simply and straightforwardly. Just as a forest pool reflects the image of a tree and all its branches, even the smallest. He was deeply shocked by my arrest. He wrote me a combat reference containing my highest praise and got the divisional commander to sign it. After he was demobilized, he continued to try to help me through my relatives. And this, mind you, was in 1947, which is not very different from 1937. At my interrogation, I had many reasons to be afraid on his account, especially lest they read my war diary, which contained the stories he told me. When I was rehabilitated in 1957, I very much wanted to find him. I remembered his village address and wrote once, and then again, but there was no reply. I discovered one thread I could follow, that he had graduated from the Yaroslavo Pedagogical Institute. When I inquired there, they replied he was sent to work in the organs of state security. Fine, all the more interesting. I wrote to him at his city address, but there was no reply. Several years passed, and Ivan Denisovich was published. When I thought, now he'll turn up. No. 3 years later, I asked one of my Yaroslavo correspondents to go to him and personally hand him a letter. My correspondent did as I asked and wrote me. Evidently, he has never read Ivan Denisovich, and truly, why should they know how things go with prisoners after they've been sentenced? This time, Ovsyannikov couldn't keep silent any longer. He wrote, after the institute, they offered me work in the organs, and it seemed to me I would be just as successful there. What did he mean, successful? I cannot say that I have prospered remarkably in my new walk of life. There are some things I did not like, but I work hard, and if I'm not mistaken, I shall not let my comrades down. And that's the justification. Comradeship. He ended, I no longer think about the future. And that is all. Allegedly, he had not received my previous letter. Evidently, he didn't want to see me. But if we had met, I think this would have been a better chapter. In Stalin's last years, he had already become an interrogator. During those very years, when they handed out 25-year sentence to everyone who came along, how did everything in his consciousness recircuit itself? How did everything black out? But remembering the one selfless, dedicated boy, as fresh as spring water, can I possibly believe that everything in him changed beyond recall, and there are no living tendrils left? When the interrogator Goldman gave Vera Korneyeva the 206 form on non-disclosure to sign, she began to catch on to her rights, and then she began to go into the case detail, involving, as it did, all 17 members of their religious group. Goldman raged, but he had to let her study the file. In order not to be bored waiting for her, he led her to a large office where half a dozen employees were sitting, and left her there. At first, she read quietly, but then a conversation began. Perhaps because the others were bored, and Vera launched aloud into a real religious sermon. One would have had to know her to appreciate this to the full. She was a luminous person with a lively mind and a gift of eloquence, even though in freedom she had been no more than a lathe operator, a stable girl, and a housewife. I listened to her impressively, now and then asking questions in order to clarify something or other. It was catching them from an unexpected side of things. People came in from other offices and the room filled up, even though they were only typists, stenographers, file clerks, and not interrogators. In 1946, this was still their milieu, the organs. It is impossible to reconstruct her monologue. She managed to work in all sorts of things, including the question of traitors to the motherland. Why were there no traders in the 1812 War of the Fatherland, when there was still serfdom? It would have been natural to have traders then, but mostly she spoke about religious faith and religious believers. Formerly, she declared, unbridled passions were the basis for everything. Steal the stolen goods, and, in that state of affairs, religious believers were naturally a hindrance to you. But now, when you want to build and prosper in this world, why do you persecute your best citizens? They represent your most precious material. After all, believers don't need to be watched. They do not steal, and they do not shirk. Do you think you can just build a just society on a foundation of self-serving and envious people? Everything in the country is falling apart. Why do you spin in the hearts of your best people? Separate church and state properly and do not touch the church. You will not lose a thing thereby. Are you materialists? In that case, put your faith in education, in the possibility that it will, as they say, disperse religious faith. But why arrest people? At this point, Goldman came in and started to interrupt rudely, but everyone shouted at him, "Oh, shut up. Keep quiet. Go ahead, woman, talk." And how should they have addressed her? Citizeness? Comrade? Those forms of address were forbidden, and these people were bound by the conventions of Soviet life. But woman, that was how Christ had spoken, and you couldn't go wrong there. And Vera continued in the presence of her interrogator. So there in the MGB office, those people listened to Corneliza. And why did the words of an insignificant prisoner touch them so near the quick? That same D. Terekov I mentioned earlier remembers to this day the first prisoner he sentenced to death. I was sorry for him. His memory obviously clings to something that came from his heart, but after that first one, he forgot many and no longer kept count anymore. No matter how I see the jailers in the big house in Leningrad, the innermost nucleus at the nucleus of the heart, for a nucleus has its own nucleus, had to continue to exist, did it not? And P recalls a time when she was taken to interrogation by an impassive, slight woman guard with unseeing eyes, when suddenly the bombs began to explode right next to the big house, and it sounded as if at the moment they would fall directly on them. The terrified guard threw her arms around her prisoner and embraced her, desperate for human companionship and sympathy. Then the bombing stopped, and her eyes became unseeing again. "Hands behind your back, move along." Well, of course, there was no great merit in that, to become a human being at the moment of death. Similarly, loving one's own children is no proof of virtue. People often try to excuse scoundrels by saying, "He's a good family man." The chairman of the Supreme Court, I.T. Gulag, is praised. He enjoyed digging in his garden. He loved books. He used to browse around used and rare bookstores. He knew the word of Tolstoy, Korolenko, and Chekhov. Well, what did he learn from them? How many thousands did he destroy? Or, for example, that colonel, Concordia, Yossi's friend, who had roared with laughter in the Vladimir detention prison at the memory of locking up a group of old Jews in an ice-filled root cellar, had been afraid of one thing only during all his debaucheries, that his wife might find out about them. She believed in him, regarded him as noble, and this faith of hers was precious to him. But do we dare accept that feeling as a bridgehead of virtue in his heart, as a bridgehead to virtue in his heart? And why is it that for nearly 200 years the security forces have hung on to the color of the heavens? That was what they wore in Lermontov's lifetime, and you, blue uniforms. Think blue service caps, blue shoulder boards, blue tabs, and then they were ordered to make themselves less conspicuous, and the blue brims were hidden from the gratitude of the people, and everything blue on heads and shoulders was made narrower, until what was left was piping, narrow rims, but still blue. Is it only a masquerade, or is it that even blackness must, every so often, however rarely, partake of the heavens? It would be beautiful to think so, but when one learns, for example, the nature of Yagoda's striving toward the sacred, an eyewitness from the group around Gorky, who was close to Yagoda at the time, reports that in the vestibule of the bathhouse on Yagoda's estate near Moscow, icons were placed so that Yagoda and his comrades, after undressing, could use them as targets for revolver practice before going in to take their baths. Just how are we to understand that? As the act of an evildoer? What sort of behavior is it? Do such people really exist? We would prefer to say such people cannot exist, that there aren't any. It is permissible to portray evildoers in a story for children so as to keep the picture simple. But when the great world literature of the past, Shakespeare, Schiller, Dickens, inflates images of evildoers of the blackest shades, it seems somewhat farcical and clumsy to our contemporary perception. The trouble lies in the way these classic evildoers are pictured. They recognize themselves as evildoers, and they know their souls are black. And the reason, quote, I cannot live unless I do evil, so I'll set my father against my brother. I'll drink the victim's sufferings until I'm drunk with them, unquote. Yago very precisely identifies his purposes and his motives as being black and born of hate. But no, that's not the way it is. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he's doing is good, or else that's a well-considered act in conformity with natural law. Fortunately, it is in the nature of a human being to seek a justification for his actions. Macbeth's self-justifications were feeble, and his conscience devoured him. Yes, even Yago was a little lamb too. The imagination and the spiritual strength of Shakespeare's evildoers stopped short at a dozen corpses because they had no ideology. Ideology, that is what gives evildoing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. That is a social theory which helps make his acts seem good instead of bad in his own eyes and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honors. That was how the agents of the Inquisition fortified their wills, by invoking Christianity, the conquerors of foreign lands by extolling their grandeur of their motherland, the colonizers by civilization, the Nazis by race, and the Jacobins, early and late, by equality, brotherhood, and the happiness of future generations. Thanks to ideology, the 20th century was fated to experience evildoing on a scale calculated in the millions. This cannot be denied, nor passed over, nor suppressed. How then do we dare insist that evildoers do not exist? And who was it that destroyed these millions? Without evildoers, there would have been no archipelago. There was a rumor going the rounds between 1918 and 1920 that the Petrograd Cheka, headed by Uritsky, and the Odessa Cheka, headed by Dyk, did not shoot all those condemned to death, but fed some of them alive to the animals in the city zoos. I do not know whether this is truth or calumny, or if there were any such cases, how many there were, but I wouldn't set out to look for proof either. Following the practice of the Bluecaps, I I would propose that they prove it to us that this was impossible. How else could they get food for the zoos in those famine years? Take it away from the working class? Those enemies were going to die anyways. So why couldn't their deaths support the zoo economy of the Republic and thereby assist our march into the future? Wasn't it expedient? That is the precise line the Shakespearean evildoer could not cross. But the evildoer with ideology does cross it, and his eyes remain dry and clear. Physics is aware of phenomena which occur only at threshold magnitudes, which do not exist at all until a certain threshold encoded by and known to nature has been crossed. No matter how intense a yellow light you shine on a lithium sample, it will not emit electrons, but as soon as a weak bluish light begins to glow, it does emit them. The threshold of the photoelectric effect has been crossed. You can cool oxygen to 100 degrees below zero centigrade, and exert as much pressure as you want. It does not yield, but remains a gas. But as soon as minus 183 degrees is reached, it liquefies and begins to flow. Evidently, evil-doing also has a threshold magnitude. Yes, a human being hesitates and bobs back and forth between good and evil all his life. He slips, falls back, clambers up, repents, things begin to darken again. Repents, things begin to darken again. But just so long as the threshold of evil-doing is not crossed, the possibility of returning remains. And he himself is still within reach of our hope. But when, through the density of evil actions, the result either of their own extreme degree or the absoluteness of his power, he suddenly crosses that threshold, he has left humanity behind, and without, perhaps, the possibility of return. From the most ancient times, justice has been a two-part concept. Virtue triumphs and vice is punished. We have been fortunate enough to live in a time when virtue, though it does not triumph, is nonetheless always tormented by attack dogs. Beaten down, sickly virtue has now been allowed to enter in all its tatters and sit in the corner, as long as it doesn't raise its voice. However, no one dares to say a word about vice. Yes, they did mock virtue, but there was no vice in that. Yes, so-and-so, many millions did get mowed down, but no one was to blame for it. And if someone pipes up, what about those who the answer comes from all sides, reproachfully and amicably at first? What are you even talking about, comrade? Why open old wounds? Then they go after you with an oaken club. Shut up. Haven't you had enough yet? You think you've been rehabilitated? At that same period, by 1966, 86,000 Nazi criminals had been convicted in West Germany. And still we choke with anger here. We do not hesitate to devote to the subject page after newspaper page and hour after hour of radio time. We even stay after work to attend protest meetings and vote. Too few. 86,000 are too few. And 20 years is too little. It must go on. And during the same period in our own country, according to the reports of the Military Collegium of the Supreme Court, about 10 men have been convicted. What takes place beyond the Oder and the Rhine gets us all worked up. What goes on in the environs of Moscow and behind the green fences near Sochi, or the fact that the murderers of our husbands and fathers ride through our streets and we make way for them as they pass, doesn't get us worked up at all. Doesn't touch us. That would be digging up the past. Meanwhile, if we translate 86,000 West Germans into our own terms on the basis of comparative population figures, it would become 1/4 of a million. But in a quarter century, we have not not tracked down anyone. We have not brought anyone to trial. It is their wounds we are afraid to reopen. And as a symbol of them all, the smug and the stupid Molotov lies on Granovsky number 3, a man who has learned nothing at all, even now, though he is saturated with our blood and nobly crosses the sidewalk to seat himself in the long, wide automobile. Here is a riddle not for us contemporaries to figure out. Why is Germany allowed to punish its evildoers and Russia is not? What kind of disastrous path lies ahead of us if we do not have the chance to purge ourselves of that putrefaction rotting inside our body? What then can Russia teach the world? In the German trials, an astonishing phenomenon takes place from time to time. The defendant claps his head in his hands, refuses to make any defense, and from then on asks no concessions from the court. He says that the presentation of his crimes revived and once again confronting him has filled him with revulsions and he no longer wants to live. That is the ultimate height a trial can attain. When evil is so utterly condemned that even the criminal is revolted by it. A country which has condemned evil 86,000 times from the rostrum of a court and irrevocably condemned it in literature and among its young people year by year, step by step, is purged of it. What are we to do? Someday our descendants will describe our several generations as generations of driveling do-nothings. First, we submissively allow them to massacre us by the millions, and then, with devoted concern, we tend to the murderers in their prosperous old age. What are we to do if the great Russian tradition of penitence is incomprehensible and absurd to them? What are we to do if the animal terror of hearing even 1/100th part of all they subjected others to outweighs in their hearts any inclination to justice? If they cling greedily to the harvest of benefits they have watered with the blood of those who perished. It is clear enough that those men who turned the handle of the meat grinder even as late as 1937 are no longer young. They are 50 to 80 years old. They have lived the best years of their lives prosperously, well-nourished and comfortable, so that it is too late for any kind of equal retribution as far as they are concerned. But let us be generous. We will not shoot them. We will not pour salt water into them, nor bury them in bedbugs, nor bridle them into a swan dive, nor keep them on sleepless stand-up for a week, nor kick them with jackboots, nor beat them with rubber truncheons, nor squeeze their skulls in iron rings, nor punch them into a cell so that they lie atop one another like pieces of baggage. We will not do any of the things they did. But for the sake of our country and our children, we have the duty to seek them all out and bring them all to trial. Not to put them on trial so much as their crimes, and to compel each one of them to announce loudly, yes, I was an executioner and a murderer. And if those words were spoken in our country only 250,000 times, at just proportion, if we are all not to fall behind West Germany, would it perhaps be enough? It is unthinkable in the 20th century to fail to distinguish between what constitutes an abominable atrocity that must be prosecuted and what constitutes the past, which ought not to be stirred up. We have to condemn publicly the very idea that some people have the right to repress others. In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age, we are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. It is for this reason, and not because of the weakness of indoctrinational work, that they are growing up indifferent. Young people are conviction that foul deeds are never punished on earth, that they always bring prosperity. It is going to be uncomfortable, horrible to live in such a country. That's the end of chapter 4. That's a really great section. I have to go through that one again. It's really one of the better sections. So chapter 5 is next. I look forward to it. It's really starting to, become compelling, a story, not just details, but really getting invested again. And I hope you're enjoying it as much as one can. Thank you for sticking with me. And I'm going to get a microphone soon, so hopefully you can hear me better. And I'll probably re-record everything I've already read. But that's not for a couple more days still, so bear with me, okay? Thank you for coming back again.